I'm Matthew Cock. I'm the Chief Executive of Vocalise, and which I'll mention in a minute. The talk is actually why we have to talk about accessibility again and again and again and again. Because it's never done. We always have to keep on ensuring that each new digital tool that we make and each offers us a new possibility to access museums. And we have to keep on thinking about whether everyone is included in those. So Vocalise is an organisation that works in the arts sector, and is our belief statement. We believe that blind and partially sighted people should have the best opportunities to experience and enjoy arts and heritage in the UK. So I'm mainly going to be referring to their experience, blind and partially sighted people's experience in my example here. But this is relevant to a broader group of people, whether now or at some point in their life, or it's relevant to one of their family or friends. You're all probably familiar, if not, you should be, with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines of the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. It's structured around 4 principles of accessibility. And I'm just going to use that as a framework and going to talk about the web briefly, but also about applying those principles to the museum as a physical space, and talk about how those two are very related. In the time I've been working at museums and with museums, digital forms have emerged and evolved, and particularly in visual formats. We started off worrying about how small thumbnails should be. Zoomable high-resolution images, video, animation, 3D models, augmented and virtual reality are now things that we're all using and all looking at. But I'm particularly interested in the words museums use, whether talking about themselves, about their collections and mission, and the words they use to talk to visitors and about visitors. And I'm going to show you some of those in a minute. Okay, to the accessibility principles. Oh, sorry, now I'm going to stick with perceivable. Okay, on the web, this covers a lot of things, from providing acceptable size and contrast of text, not using images to display text, providing captions for video, transcripts for audio, and generally ensuring that information is either transferable from one form to another, either enabled by the tools or be pre-prepared by owners, by website owners, i.e. the museums. You can obviously apply the same principle to the museum itself. Is your label text available in large print or braille? Are there transcripts of audio guides, or are there BSL videos instead of audio guides? If you're using new technology, are we making that accessible? Gorgeous 3D models, seductive HD video, immersive virtual reality. These are used to show us things, show us context, but is it perceivable? Does it alone help us understand? The Tate recently has done a virtual reality project for the Modigliani exhibition. Now, I haven't seen that yet, but so I'm about to criticise it, and I've not even seen it. But I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So I looked online. The VR does include audio narration with accounts discussing the objects, the artist, and the environment. There's interestingly an FAQ on Tate's website that reassures people that the VR can be used by wheelchair users, which is curious. There's a transcript of the audio is made available for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. But while the narration, which you can hear bits of, which you can read in that transcript, so I didn't need to go and see it. The narration does include some descriptive language, but there's no description of the virtual studio that you're seeing in the virtual reality. Something that could simply have been added. Now, I don't want to criticise Tate. They do amazing stuff, including for blind and partially sighted audience, and they almost certainly will be running audio-described tours for the exhibition. They may take in the virtual reality. But, and as I said, I haven't yet been to the show, but all of my knowledge is based on my visit to Tate's website. And that's part of my point. Making decisions about visiting a museum is often started by visiting the website. of a survey done by Ewan's Guide showed that 95 of their disabled respondents stated that they'd tried to find access information before visiting it, and then 54% of them stated that they avoided going to new places if there wasn't relevant access information. We, in 2016, vocalised did a survey of all 1,700 accredited museums, and we found that 27% of museums had zero access information at all. Okay, the next principle, operable. On the web, this means that users must be able to operate and interact with the website in ways that work for them. So allowing for keyboard use, keyboard navigation for people for whom a pointer is unhelpful because they can't see the screen or because they physically can't use a mouse. My equivalent here for the museum is not expecting, in the physical museum, is not expecting all visitors to behave the same way during their visit, and providing the space, time and adaptations for those visitors without them. So kind of autism-friendly events. The Mary Rose Museum has lights up mornings, which were developed as they recognise that some visitors with a visual impairment or with other conditions find the usual lighting levels, which are designed to kind of create mood and obviously also for helping protect light-sensitive objects. They found that challenging, so they have lights up mornings. So that's the Mary Rose Museum is making their museum operable. The third principle is understandable. And on the museum website, this is about language being simple, concise, and direct, and functionality and navigation being obvious, consistent, and predictable. Because obviously, you can make the same analogy with that in the physical museum about having clear signage and good lighting and clear, the clarity within the museum. Now, if language is understandable, then it hopefully is accessible. But it may not be inclusive. To be inclusive, the language has to address people directly, make them feel that they're being welcomed, and that the museum, in this case, is encouraging them to visit. Museum marketing teams spend weeks getting their copy right just to entice people to galleries and exhibitions. But the access information on museum websites can be strikingly different. So I want to show you two examples of text from access information on museum websites that I found during our survey. Okay. The museum recognises that different users have different needs and is committed to providing access to all visitors. The museum works to identify and remove barriers that might prevent fair and equal access to the museum's collections, as far as is practical and within budgetary, legal and planning constraints. Now, okay, that starts off quite well. It starts off saying, we're going to be, we're actually going to do something about this. But interestingly, it ends pretty badly. The language is increasingly corporate, and the ending leaves you feeling a bit like Charlie and Grandpa Joe, and here's my Willy Wonka connection there. So this is great. And here's my memes. Okay, my second example. This access statement does not contain personal opinions as to our suitability for those with access needs, but aims to accurately describe the facilities and services that we offer all our visitors. Again, this is very curious. It's not actually addressed to anybody. It's a self-referential statement, this access statement, so it's talking to itself, which is very, very curious. And obviously, it's also the fact that it's a statement. That's things that politicians do when they got into trouble, or the police issue statements. But again, it means well, because actually that's what you want to access information to do, not to say you can't visit this if you use a wheelchair, or you can't do this. It's well-meaning, but does it in a very bad way. Now, we need to bury access statements very deep. We should take the information within access statements and write them in plain and honest language. I'm going to give you an example of the best one I've found. The Roald Dahl Museum and Story Centre, we welcome all visitors and aim to do everything we can to make sure every visitor has a buzz-wangling time. So that's the best one I've found. So my fourth principle the content must be robust. Content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of user agents, including assistive technologies. So responsive design, cross-browser compatibility, working with assistive technologies. Within the museum, for us, we do a lot of recorded audio description in museums, and we're often asked what the best device is for blind and partially sighted people. And our answer is that blind and partially sighted people aren't a homogeneous group of people. They have very diverse preferences, they have very diverse ages, so the answer is as many as possible. Many use smartphones and apps, which can be made accessible using voiceover and gesture control, but many people don't, and they're not going to learn in 5 minutes at your front desk. So have a device with a physical keypad, make the audio available online as well. I'm now on my, it was 10 minutes, wasn't I? I know I shouldn't have done that. Okay, I'm going to sum up. People will not come to your museum if they don't feel that they belong or are included as a website visitor. An inaccessible website, or one with little access information, will reduce someone's confidence that the venue itself has addressed barriers to access. They will exclude themselves. We often mistake what we see for what something is and how it is perceived by others. Unless museums provide large print labels or guides, audio descriptive tours, and trained staff to support people's visit, then they're going to be closed to the over 2 million people in the UK who live with a visual impairment. That's around 1 in 30 people. The museums all need websites that are not only perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust themselves, but they also help people who have a visual impairment and other disabled people perceive, operate, and understand the museum itself. We're going to be publishing the State of Museum Access 2018 later this year, and this is a repeat of our survey of 2016, and it's going to go much wider. So when you finish today, just go back to your websites, if you run a museum website, and just check you've got really good access information, because we'll be using your examples as slides next year if you're not careful. Thank you. Any questions?
Go on. Do we know what best practice in terms of accessibility for VR is actually like yet?
No, I don't know if we do, but I think that including audio and using description, we're hopefully going to be doing a trial with which I can't talk about because it's not my project, but we're hopefully going to be involved in helping a VR project this year, so that we can do some tests. But I keep Googling it, and I've still not seen a good, someone writing about or talking about a project that's done it well. So, but I'm hopefully going to get corrected in a minute.
So, do you think the best and only way is, for example, if we're talking about a VR experience, but it could be any kind of experience, for the one project to cover all the needs of everyone, or could you also imagine that, for example, for VR specifically, it might be appropriate to have one main VR for people with normal sight and another version for people with disabilities in terms of sight? Like, is that something that you think that's like you shouldn't be aiming for that? Or?
My feeling is that you should probably at least try to make the one thing work for as many people as you can. And as I say, there's so many. It isn't a black or white thing, especially sight loss. It's like there's only a very small proportion of people who have literally no sight. It's like 1 or 2% of people who have a visual impairment have no sight, and there's a vast range of people and different types of sight loss. So you can think, oh well, we'll design it for this group of people, and then it won't for another. But then it's about using, using different sensory stuff and having description, and then giving people control whether they can turn that on or off, because some people won't want a lot of verbal description. So it's giving control in the same way that with a website you might give people control to go, well, I want black text on white, or white text on black, or black on yellow, and so giving people control. But then it may be that some people just prefer not to use the visual VR at all, and then reading that text that you wrote that for the description is enough. So yeah, so I'm not really answering, but I think you need to try to start with, and then there may be people who prefer an alternative. Yeah, John.
Public sector funders like the Arts Council and the HLF would certainly expect everyone to have equal access rather than a cut down, possibly slightly poorer version for people with impairments. And as a deaf person myself, I'd feel a bit crap if I had to look at a slightly watered down vanilla version of a piece of work funded with public money.
Yeah.
But having said that, it's kind of difficult in the very first instance when you're commissioning VR to think about those issues, and it is a really big conundrum, I think.
I would like to see more positive examples. I mean, when you talk about accessibility, you always hear what you should not do.
Yeah.
And I think we can motivate people more by
That is true.
things that you can do, and give really good examples.
Yeah. I'll come back next year.
Talk about the
Yes, and I'm organised. I'm involved in something called the Jody Awards, which is a biennial award for good use of technology and access. So go to jodyawards.org.uk, and there are over 10 years of awardees for good practice. So there are a lot of good examples out there.
Thank you very much.